Prereading Day. This day talks about how participants in conflict see themselves and others, and how that facilitates or contributes to conflict. So whether parties hold each other in a way that's humanizing and dehumanizing at the same time, like in the Smith article, or in the Buccola article, Frederick Douglass's perspective on how we hold people in dignity, or how we hold ourselves in dignity or not. Those are shadows of each other. The last article by Rothman and Alberstein about how people see themselves as individuals and their role within groups and intergroups. Those are all ideas about how the way that people see themselves and others might contribute to conflict. Day 1 asks us to look at conflict resolution in a way that's critical, meaning that we're going to look at cultural assumptions, and one of those leads us from looking at the problem objectively as resolving the way that participants see each other, and holding the mediator or conflict resolution practitioner in some kind of objective, neutral position, to looking at that assumption and saying that maybe as mediators, if we're neutral, we might preserve a power imbalance that's being transferred through structure or language or some other ethically challenging assumption. So instead, Jones says that we should examine this Western idea that the mind and the body are dual, and start to work from a framework that people are whole. And so there is no objective, rational reality, that what we really need to do is start to question the assumptions of the practitioner, like McGain says, and that there are many ways to do this, including the diamond method. So as we work, we're looking to challenge the assumptions of ourselves as practitioners, and also the assumptions of the people that we're practicing with. We'll talk about some of the ethical considerations to do with that in my own thought process there. Okay, by day 2, we are being asked to be reflective in our facilitation of change. So now we have gone beyond being a neutral party with some assumption of impartiality, and the articles assume that we have an agency or advocacy towards change, and that we're choosing theories of change, but that we should be reflective in our practice so that we're constantly developing our theory and shifting it, and that we have a responsibility to communicate with our fellow professionals about what we have learned. And so now we're exploring this triple loop learning, where we're expected to have a critical idea of what we're doing in our own practice, and asking organizations also to have that critical loop mentality so that they can constantly learn and apply ethically from what they're learning to prevent conflict. How do we implement being agents of change without having a harmful effect? And so now we're looking at a more complex idea of what our role is as conflict resolution practitioners. Day 3, I'm going to call holding space. So at the beginning, we had this role as a problem solver, and day 3, Nan is asking us to take a role of holding space for participants to raise their own consciousness. What? Or developing peacemaking in a RAI with integrated dialogue, or bringing people together in Jansi and allowing them to question their own assumptions, right? Warfield offers this practical framework for these ethical decisions or discussions, asking us as practitioners to constantly reflect on our practice and engage with each other as we go through these unique and complicated assumptions in our practice. Now, this brings us to a place where instead of solving problems, we are now creating this space for people to go through internal enlightenment, and this has its own ethical challenges. This is very difficult work for people, and if we think of really complex conflict, sometimes examining our own assumptions and paradigms are going to bring us into a place where we recognize that we've harmed someone. That can be very difficult. So I really enjoyed this particular day, and now my ideas are totally shifting about what the role of the conflict practitioner is. Day 4 wraps us up. This day has moved us completely from being impartial mediators to what methods we could use to have people engage in meaningful dialogue with each other, meaning that we've stepped completely away from trying to problem solve and towards having people meaningfully engage with each other or themselves. And the Coleman article giving us some perspective that some positive engagement may be better than change, or Maisie saying that we should engage with our emotions rather than rationally trying to solve the problem, and offer some modalities for doing that through art or ritual, which I thought was a meaningful way to tie in some artworks that I see happen. Goldberg and his discussion about worldview really helped, because now that we've acknowledged that we are agents of change and that we have our own worldview and that our participants have their own worldview, instead of just saying that we should try to analyze and discard our own worldview, now we're saying there are ways to categorize it. And then through this radical transparency, maybe the answer is to be open with clients so that they can choose the person with the worldview that's going to be most useful for them. The Letter Act Toolkit is a big work for the 3 minutes that I have left. But the main takeaway for me was that instead of, as a facilitator, managing the theories of change with an effort of one party trying to change another, which is probably what's going to happen if we are getting paid by one side. But ideally, what if we brought people together and allowed them to choose what their theories of change are, and everyone agree to elicit those changes together, rather than one party or individual or group trying to change someone else through some kind of coercion. And that really clicked for me and made sense. All right, Dr. Malden, I have had a real profound change in the way that I think about conflict resolution through this course. Before the course, I struggled very much with the role as a conflict resolution practitioner for several reasons. One, I'm trained as a mediator and facilitator who is to maintain their independence and neutrality. And meanwhile, I've been struggling with the idea that that's almost impossible. The other is because of my background as a yoga teacher, where I'm trained to hold space for people to have their own experience, and recognizing that each person is an individual, and whether they come away with something positive or negative is really both okay. So when I started down this path of conflict resolution, I really have the heart of an activist. When I see inequity, especially here, I live in Texas in the South, we have a lot of opportunities to bring resolution to structural problems that we have and inequities. We have a lot of oppression, and I really have the heart of someone who wants to make change. So then I'm looking at problems like they are a chess board, and through the writings that we've worked with, I've come to recognize that is objectifying a problem and people, and that is unethical. I've also recognized that my own worldview and my own assumptions, I'm not going to be able to erase them and that's okay. I like the idea of having some transparency in what my intentions are. I also have been really afraid of unintentionally, through my own worldview or ignorance, affecting change that ends up having a negative consequence. That has been a real challenge for me, and I still think that I'm working through some of that fear. I've also struggled with some feelings of inadequacy because there has been kind of an unnamed acknowledgement that, or unacknowledged factor, that problems are not just dyads like in the Coleman article. And so recognizing that and having other practitioners say, hey, look, it's not this boiled down simplification of one culture against another or one religion against another. I've always kind of recognized that there's such this complexity that it's almost unable to grasp. But through the readings, when we got to this place where we can bring parties together and they can themselves agree on some theory of change that they would like to enact, and that the facilitator's role is to hold space for that to happen and work on guiding people towards recognition of each other's desire for change. That is a place where I'm way more comfortable as a practitioner, and it models. It's familiar to me because of the way that I've practiced training yoga teachers, that you present the material in a way that they can choose a direction to go in their own way, that they can interpret ideas and implement them in their own to their own benefit. And so I feel like the idea that we can recognize feelings and work with art and consciousness is really a space where I feel much more comfortable. So I guess in closing, I'd like to express my gratitude for the way that the course is structured and the material that has been presented. At times I felt a little bit lost in the complexity of the articles and the way that they were arranged. I just wanted the answer. But through this process, I think that I've been able to find some changes in the way of my own consciousness about being a practitioner. And I'm heading to Bosnia next month, and it brings me in. We're going to study how art is one of the modalities that they're using in the post-genocidal society. And I'm really excited to approach practice with this framework. So I just would like to say thank you. And I appreciate you taking the time to watch the video essay. I know that you're probably very busy, and I look forward maybe to working with you in the future. Have a great day.